Timothy Kirkhope, Conservative MEP for Yorkshire and the Humber. A big fall coming on roaming charges. These are the costs of making a call and using your phone when you're abroad on holiday. Is it significant?
Yes, it's very significant, and this is one of those areas that I think the consumer, my constituents, have been most concerned about over the years, because sometimes, almost without full awareness, they find themselves abroad for a short time maybe, or even longer on business, or whatever it may be. They find themselves suddenly subject to enormous charges, hiked up charges by the phone companies, and I think that restricting this, reducing these amounts will be very helpful.
And one of these caps is to do with so-called data roaming, so using the internet, using email when you're abroad. How important is it that that's included, that it's not just about the phone calls, about the text messages, it's also about using the internet abroad?
Yes. Well, that is probably even more significant, because of course more and more people now are actually using the networks in order to move data and to download data. And even people with, say, small businesses or even private individuals do now use more data through the phone networks than they do speech. It's got to be good news all round from an economic point of view.
And I guess you mentioned business there. I guess businesses are wanting to do work over abroad, and these are additional costs that they don't want to be having to pay.
Yes, I mean, this is obviously a matter, we're talking about Europe here, but of course Europe is a massive trading bloc. We are competing very strongly in the world. It's vitally important, therefore, that our businesses in particular, smaller businesses, entrepreneurs and so on, can actually use latest technology, use the communication systems that exist, and not find themselves being penalised too heavily.
Longer term, there's talk about getting rid of roaming charges altogether. Is that something that you would like to see, and how might that work?
Yes, I mean, I think that would be ideal if we could do that, but we have to look at this also in terms of the competitiveness of the marketplace, and also the viability of phone companies and others who use the network. So I think that whilst it may well be desirable to do that, we have to make sure actually that we don't find ourselves burdened with a lot of new regulations to replace it. And this is always the problem. When the Commission gets involved, sometimes from a European point of view, they cannot leave things alone. If they aim just for this and discussions with the network providers, then fair enough. But I think if they go much further and start doing a whole range of things, then it will affect the competitiveness of our telecommunication companies.
And just a final point to return to kind of the central change that we're seeing, the cuts in roaming charges in July.
Yes.
Are people still seeing kind of those hideous bills, those stories that you're perhaps getting in your mailbag? Are people still having those problems? Is it getting better because of these price caps?
Well, since we first indicated that there would be a careful look at the roaming charges themselves, the phone companies, I think almost without exception, have been warning and notifying people when they travel that there are certain charges in different places. They have been actually notifying them. That is, in my view, absolutely essential, so that the customer then has some choice, both in terms of who provides their signals and how they deal with these things. So that has been a start. And it seems to me to be evidence that the phone companies do react positively when they're given a lead.